Hello everybody, Brad the Guitarologist here. I'm at a stopping point on some other projects and it's time to get around to this one. Another box to open. Let's see what's inside. Okay, let's open this thing up. Stuff on all sides. Tape everywhere. Alright. Please no more tape. Okay. There we go. Finally out. This is like an early 70s Japanese made bass amp. Alright, here's a little better look at this thing. I'm not even exactly sure what it is. It says Deluxe Bass Amp on it, and that's about the only identifying mark that I can see. There's no back panel to prevent you from reaching up in here. Maybe the owner took it off and left it off. It's been a little while since we corresponded about this thing, so I presume that right there came out of here. Like I said, it's been a minute since we spoke about this, so I'll have to figure out what it is that is. Okay, I found our correspondence here. It says, "Hi Brad, I enjoy your channel quite a bit, and it got me wondering. I have an old solid-state head. The amp worked at the time I got it, but blew a few fuses. So that's kind of scary until one day it just stopped working. That was about 10 years ago, and I've always thought about getting it repaired. Since it's an oddball, I thought you might be interested in repairing it for your channel." He went on to say in another message that that trim pot, he tried to repair this amp with the help of a forum years ago, and that trim pot he desoldered himself. One thing I will say, if this looks like it's going to go much beyond like an hour of repair time, I'm probably going to let him know it may not be worth it. He's already spent, I know he's already into it for some amount. He spent $35 to get it to me via USPS. And I'll just let you guys know right now, USPS is usually a little bit higher on packages like this than both UPS and FedEx. But I've had about the best luck with UPS, and here lately FedEx has been treating me pretty well too. Their prices are very competitive. Take the time to sign up for a UPS or a FedEx account on their website and go there. You'll usually get better rates if you do that. You put in all the information on the site, print out your own label, just slap the label on. Then when you take it to like a UPS store or FedEx store or something like that, it doesn't take as long. You don't have to stand in line and stand there quite as long. You can just hand it to them and get a receipt and walk back out the door, and it costs less. So this thing was 35 bucks, like I said, to ship, and I just don't know if it's going to end up being worth it. You know, I guess we'll see, but that box was actually also bigger than I would have made it. Just a tip for the future, if you send me something like this that's a head or whatever, you could probably save yourself some money on the weight by shipping it if you just keep the cabinet part at your house and just send me this. Like the way he had that wrapped in the cardboard, he could just wrap this right here in the cardboard and then stuck it inside of a little bit of a smaller box than the one he stuck it in, and then shipped it via UPS or FedEx from their website, and it probably would have cost more like 15 bucks instead of like 35. So one thing I noticed right off the bat is that this transformer is pretty wobbly, that it needs to be tightened up. Yeah, just looking this thing over, you can really tell the cheapness with which it was made. The cheap PCB board aside, just look at the solder joints. Look at the sloppiness with which all this solder was done. I mean, look at this. These are barely even on there. That's barely got any solder even on it. This one, look at that, see? Over here, same story. You just got the leads laid across the top, which isn't, I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world, but at the same, if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you get enough solder on there. It's just not done very well at all. But yeah, we're just going to have to go through and examine every single solder joint in this thing and make sure everything's at least getting good connections. What do we have here? We have some Matsushita 2SA 546. Probably the same thing on this one. 2SC 696. And all the capacitors are Rubicon. We've got a little transistor there, XC372. There's another transistor here. Looks like maybe the same thing, but nope, it's different. No schematic on this, so unless I can cross-reference any of these parts that are bad, we're going to be pretty SOL on this. I think what I may do, I'll reinstall that little pot that he yanked out of this thing right down there. I'll reinstall it. We'll examine the bottom of this board for any broken solder joints or anything like that. And we may as well go ahead and do that. There you can see where that part was taken off the board. There's something that's not soldered on right there. What is that? Or if it is soldered on, it's... yeah, maybe it is soldered on. It just doesn't look like it. The solder doesn't go all the way around. It's kind of par for the course on this thing so far. There's another that could be reflowed right there. So, yeah, really this is not the best soldering job in the world. So there's a lot to do on this thing before we really get started troubleshooting it. Alright, first things first, let's solder this 500K pot back into place. I'm just going to get some, hopefully there's enough solder here to just tack it on for a sec so I don't have to keep holding it. Alright. Just want to make sure that area is good and clean from anything that might cause arcing or shorting. Okay. I don't see anything else on here that's really obviously bad as far as the soldering joints. Wait a minute. Wait. Hold the phone. What's that? What is that? It's just an empty hole. Alright, let's touch up the solder on these pots, because they look absolutely atrocious. Here's the one that wasn't even soldered on. Now on a repair like this too, we just gotta keep mindful that the longer I go with this, the less worth it it's gonna end up being in the end. Okay. These output transistors, these are Matsushita also. They are 2SC647. And, you know, if he's not getting any output out of this thing at all, then these are automatically a suspect. But I guess at this point, I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down, hook it up to a speaker, and see if we get any output from it at all. He did say it was blowing fuses, so we might as well go ahead and check the fuse as well. That's a 6 amp fuse though. My gosh, 6 amps. I can't imagine that being the correct fuse. But if it was blowing fuses, that could also be that it just had the wrong fuse that was too small in it as well. I would say something about maybe along the lines of a 1/2 amp, you know, would probably be adequate. Tell you what we'll do. We'll start out with the 6 amp fuse, but we'll take it up on the Variac slowly and do a couple of measurements and just make sure that we're okay before I go to anything. I mean, I don't want to sit here and just blow fuse after fuse trying to fix this thing and throw good money after bad. But at the same time, if it's good and it was blowing fuses and it's something else, then I also don't want to take out a transformer or something, which may already be dead. Look how taut these wires are to this fuse. You could almost play it like a guitar, but look, it's been twisted. See there? The wires have been twisted, so this thing has been over tightened at some point, it looks like. Get off of there. What the hell? There we go. Jeez. Okay. Now we've got some slack, see? And I don't like the look of that solder right there either, so I guess we'll go ahead and touch that up. Mismatched screws is always a good sign. That's exactly what we've got. Alright, well, I think we've got everything pretty much soldered back together like it should be. The pot's back in and everything too. I'm going to go ahead and clean that pot as well. And we'll start out with it straight up and down. And I guess let's put it on a speaker, fire it up, see what it does. If we can't get anything at all, then we'll start with a signal trace. Alright, we've got a little rinky-dink speaker hooked up here. I'm using it because it's 8 ohms and it's small. It'll fit up here on the desk. We're going to keep the volume very low to begin with anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. It's at least going to show us whether we're getting something to the output. So yeah, let's go ahead and dial it up on the Variac. I hear something already out of the speaker, which is interesting because the voltage is very low. Man, this thing's pulling 37 watts at 1/2 amp, and we're only at 69 volts on the input. Yeah, this is either a capacitor issue or a transistor issue. Of that, I'm fairly certain. We're down to 80 watts of power now at 0.87 amps, I think, because one of these capacitors is reforming or something, probably. Maybe that big one. With the volume all the way down, we definitely have some capacitor noise. Well, we're down to 68 watts of power at 0.73 amps. So it's steadily coming down, but that just reinforces my idea that this is probably something to do with a capacitor somewhere. And that transformer is definitely getting hot. Here, I'll show you. You can kind of see the output transistors are getting hot too, which you would expect. That's why they've got a big heat sink. But over here, that's the transformer, and it is getting hot. Let's see. Yeah, it's at around 150 degrees at the hottest point, and it's hot to the touch. It's definitely hot to the touch. Yeah, I can kind of even smell the thing baking a little bit. The good news is it's not drawn as much as it was. It's down to 67 watts, but still, you wouldn't expect really anything near that. I wouldn't imagine on something like this. But see, we're only at 98 volts on the input. Something's not right. Something's shorted, and this is heating up, and we need to figure out what's shorted. This amp has been off for several minutes, and this transformer is still too hot to leave your hand on. I mean, that's very hot. There's definitely either something wrong in this transformer, or we have something over here is really drawing down voltage. The highest voltage I found at any point on this thing was about 15 volts, which I don't know. It's hard to say whether or not that's adequate. I don't have a schematic for this thing. This is a little signal generator that I ordered off of banggood.com and put together myself. And it probably takes about 45 minutes if you're a decent solderer to put one of these together, including the little case that it comes with and everything. I'll put a link down in the description if you want to check one of these out. But we're just going to use this time to inject a signal into the front end of the amp. We just need a constant signal coming in, and what we're going to do is we're going to come into each one of these gain stages, and we'll check whether there's signal coming off of it. We'll feed it into that amp back there, and we'll see where we're dropping signal. You have a couple different output options on this. I've just stuck these wires in here just to have something to clip to, because I use gator clips a lot, so I've just stuck the wires in to leave them permanently. You can use a sine wave or triangular wave, and that's selectable here. It turns a sine wave into a triangular wave if you move that jumper. But we're going to use the sine wave function. You have a square wave function here if you prefer, but we're just going to hook our leads up like so, and we'll come over here and inject the signal into one of these inputs. Okay, here's the probe we're going to use, and we'll just hook a gator clip up to our probe. This is essentially just a long wire with a capacitor in there in case we hit some high voltage on other amps. We shouldn't hit anything high on this amp. And what I usually do, I just plug a cable in, go to the tip with our probe, and then we'll go to the ground. With another gator clip, and we'll just attach it to ground somewhere here. Now it's going to be inherently noisy because this is not, none of this part is shielded, so you have to keep that in mind. We're not really looking for noise necessarily. We're just trying to see where the signal's dropping. And we're getting something to the output, but it is very low because that volume's all the way up. So let's see where we're dropping signal. Okay, so on this transistor, we got a small signal coming in, which should be about the same amplitude as the original signal. Maybe a little bit less because we got some resistors it goes through. Then we've got a bigger signal coming out of it, which we would expect, and then it should be on to this next one. Let's see, probably there. And then out of it, smaller signal. That signal right there is larger than that signal. I have not looked at the a data sheet for this transistor, which again is a whatever it is. It's a, well, let's see. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Alright, well, so far the only one that seems to be working correctly is this first one. So that's correct. Then this has to be the second stage, but we're getting very low output from that. So either this transistor or one of the components between this output and this input is bad. Okay, so this stage is actually adjustable apparently. On the output transistors as well. I get signal on the case of this one. I get no signal on the case of that one, so we've got a problem with that side also apparently on the output. I'll pull this transistor right here first, and then if that's not it, I'll come back, I think, and pull each one of these capacitors one at a time and just start checking those, because we've definitely got signal coming out of this thing. So this is a working transistor, but we're not sure about this one. Okay, we're going to check this thing on the component tester here. Cool thing about this tester is it will test virtually anything you put on it. So, and it should tell me what it is. This is an NPN transistor, so it does recognize it. But what's interesting is between the base of this transistor and the, what I presume is the collector of this transistor, granted there are some other components involved there, but the signal was lessened, so it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that you would be losing that much signal between that first transistor and the second one just because of the interceding components. So anyway, let's get this back in there. At least the tester did recognize it as a transistor, so it's got that going for it, but it's an NPN, so you know what? I've got a bunch of NPNs. I may just try to sub it. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm just going to try subbing it first. This one's a bit of a different configuration though. This one's got the collector's pin 3 and the base is pin 2. That's actually no big deal. All we got to do is we'll just put it in a different direction. All right. Interesting. I can actually hear something. I can hear more just touching this input jack now. I can hear more of a signal than I could before. So that's a good sign, I guess. It's louder. That's for damn sure. Well, that's progress. Let's kill it again. And there's definitely still more wrong with it. Let's check. Let's go through and start checking these capacitors. Problem here is I have no schematics, so I'm kind of flying blind. And really, to check capacitors, you have to get them out of circuit. So it's a pain in the ass, but it just needs to be done. My sneaking suspicion here is we're going to find probably more than one of these that is bad, and one of them probably, or possibly more than one, is shorted. We also might have some shorted components in the output. Right now we're still in the preamp stages. It would not surprise me if we found some of these that are bad but aren't the larger problem. Okay, we need to make sure we have this oriented correctly. Okay, this thing was oriented this way with the negative on the outside. So let's get our handy dandy little tester here. We'll get rid of that guy. And now this guy, let's see what we've got here. Ooh, 9% loss, ESR 16. Wow. Okay, this is a bad capacitor. It's supposed to be 33 microfarad. And it's 53, but look at the loss. I am guessing that every single one of these capacitors is probably going to test about the same way. Alright, I really don't have the correct capacitor for this. This is a 6.3 volter, and all I've really got is a 50. It's not ideal, but I'm going to make it work. And the way you make these work, it's actually, this is an axial style as well, whereas this one is a radial. But the way you can do this is bend over your negative lead. You can do this, and then that puts both leads on the same side. And you can clip them both like that, kind of even them up. And let's see, on this board the negative was to the outside, we said, so the negative goes this way. Alright, so let's solder that in. But like I said, that's a bad part. This one was, transistor was weak, so there's two bad parts that we've found so far. Okay, there's that capacitor. I'm not even going to test it. You know, I know it's probably going to be an improvement, but I also know for a fact that these other capacitors are probably going to be just as bad. So let's just go through the other capacitors. If you're taking components on and off of a board like this, instead of getting your solder sucker out and all that crap, usually the easiest way to do this is just to wiggle the component from on one side of the board while you kind of desolder from the other side, and usually you can sort of break them loose without having to even bust out a solder sucker or anything like that. We have a 25 volt 1 microfarad. Once again, we'll put it on here and we'll see what we got. 50 picofarad. 50 picofarad. This is supposed to be a 1 microfarad. So that's not right at all. I don't have that exact value, 1 microfarad, but I do have something that's fairly close. I probably have like a 2 microfarad, so we'll replace it with that. My daughter's here looking over my shoulder, so now I'm kind of teaching her how to solder and stuff.
Yeah, why do we have to solder?
Because it holds all these components in place.
Oh. Wow, look at that smoke.
Yeah, don't breathe it in. Just stay well back. Okay, there's 2 down. I mean, I think we're going to be pretty much well on our way to a total recap here. We've got a couple of others I'm going to replace before we move on. I'm thinking our biggest problems are going to be these 2 capacitors right here, or one of them at least.
That's a really big capacitor.
That is a big capacitor. It's also a large value. This one is 1,000 microfarad at 75.
1,000?
1,000 microfarad. Okay. Alright, here we go. 10 microfarad capacitor. Let's see what it does. Ooh, it's only at 17, or it's at 17 microfarad. Low ESR, and it's a little bit lossy, but it's way wrong, way off on the value, so yep. Needed to go. It probably wasn't the source of any problems, but it's not a good capacitor either. Let's try this other one. And we'll get it in there. Retest. I absolutely adore this little tester. This is one of the coolest things I've purchased in a good long while.
It seems very cool.
See, this one's a little bit lossier than the other one. Still fairly low ESR, but you know, we're 50% higher on the value than we should be. So once again, probably wasn't the source of any issues, but still not a good capacitor. Alright, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 capacitors changed, and we have 1 transistor changed. I think just for shits and giggles, we may as well go ahead and fire it up and see if it might have been one of these capacitors that was causing part of the problem. I'm guessing it's going to sound a little bit better than it did, but that's not going to be all of the problem. These components would not have caused this transformer, which is still hot by the way, to heat up like that. Maybe this output transistor is bad, or maybe both of them are bad, I don't know, but definitely this one is not getting signal on the case like this one was, and I still suspect these large capacitors. So there's that and that. Now let's turn it. You hear that? Okay, so that's already much louder than it was. Okay, this transistor tested good, but I did go ahead and replace it just for the heck of it, because I wanted to see if it would kind of change the output. It really didn't matter either way, so I'm just going to leave this out for the moment. I may stick it back in, but for the moment, I mean, this will work. I am going to skip testing these for now, and I'm going to move along because I know for a fact that something is not right with the output. Alright, once again, this will kind of give you an opportunity to see what I mean when I say you don't necessarily have to grab your solder sucker at every turn. I mean, here's what I do in situations like this. I just try to lift the leads up of the component that I'm trying to get out. And in a situation like this where you only have 2 leads, it's pretty simple. You just melt one side and pull, melt the other side and pull, and just kind of go back and forth until the thing is out. Simple. Then you want to, again, try to take note of the orientation. And in this case, the negative is toward the outside of the board. Alright, so let's get our tester, and we'll stick this thing on there and see what it's testing at. Testing at 1,000 microfarad, even though it's supposed to be 470. It's a little bit lossy, very low ESR though. So I'm going to go ahead and stick a new capacitor in it. Check those 2 resistors in the power supply here. Can that be right? I've just got paint on there, like green, black, silver, silver. So yeah, I think that's supposed to be 0.5 ohms. So yeah, so 0.69, that's about a half an ohm. And this one, I think, goes to there. It's 0.7 ohms, probably still close enough. I can't imagine being that little bit off is going to be a problem. Let's pull this big capacitor and check it at long last. You know, a big part of me is saying that that's a problem. Okay, now this thing has got these really large leads because it's such a large capacitor. It's got these big blade leads. Alright, there we go. Now once again, being careful to note the orientation. I'm sure it wouldn't be hard to figure out. I'm sure this is the negative out here to the side. And let's see. That is correct. I think that says negative is the black lead. I'll be curious to see what this thing measures at. Let's put this on this little tester. Whoa. 2 diodes. The hell? Wow, okay. That is definitely not a good capacitor. Let's change that. Alright, I've gone ahead and tested both of these diodes that were in this amplifier as well. And both these diodes are okay. I am going to go ahead and replace these though with a slightly more robust pair. Alright, I'll test these output transistors. Yeah, the collector is on the outside. Base is on pin 3, so the base is on the bottom. Let's test the other one now. Okay, let's test this one now. I'll be shocked if it comes up good. Yeah, unknown or damaged part, I would say so. Let's try it one more time just to be sure. Yeah, see, we're coming up with 2 resistors again, so that's... Let me move my leads just one more time. And we'll try it again. Yeah, 2 resistors. This is definitely a bad part. Alright, let's go through some of my parts here and see what I have. I do have some output transistors. Okay, this is a PNP. The one we're looking for is an NPN. And these are probably all good. Well, no, they're not the same. That's an RCA. There's a Toshiba. So we've got a few different things here. I don't know what's what. Those 2 are a match. And there's 2 RCA 2869s. So those 2 are a match. This ought to be a power amplifier. That is an NPN amplifier. And I think this one is going to be just fine. Okay, let's set that Motorola aside. This Motorola, if this one works as well, and it does, it's an NPN output transistor, Motorola number 2N3055. And I'll look up some numbers and see if it's close, but I mean, just judging by this should be fairly close to what we have in here, and I think it's going to be just fine. So what I'm going to do, I believe, is just change both of these. Okay, so there are both of those Motorola 2N3055s mounted. These are both from 1978. And these are going to be better output transistors, I'm sure, than the ones that were in here. Alright, let's get this thing wired back up. Okay. I think maybe we should go up slowly on a Variac, test some voltages. We don't want to exceed 35 volts, and we're almost exceeding it now. So yeah, we're definitely going to need a different capacitor right there. Okay, we're right at 35 volts. So So that's the point at which that capacitor right there will likely fail if we leave it that much longer. But I tell you what, we are out of the woods, I think, as far as our power is concerned. And it's no wonder why it was blowing fuses. 2.1 watts is all we're drawing now at 64 volts on the input, at 2.2 watts, 0.04 amps. That's way more like it for a solid state amplifier. That's, I mean, way more like it. So this thing is actually going to be a pretty decent amplifier now with all of the capacitors changed. We're going to do something different with this one here. I really didn't have the right value, but we'll find something to substitute there. Already this thing is loud. That's just with that teeny tiny speaker right there. While I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go ahead and change this fuse to like a little half-amp fuse. I would say if it happens again, it should blow, but it should not be replaced with anything bigger than that. Okay, I'm going to have to do some sleight of hand here to make up a capacitor value that will be suitable. I have 4 1000 microfarad at 35 volt capacitors. What I am going to do is create 2 of these, so that's 2 capacitors in series. I'm going to do the same thing with these. Then I'm going to take this one and this one and put them in parallel, and the reason for that, I need something that is going to be upwards of 70-75 volts of power handling. So these 2 capacitors have a total power handling of 70 volts, which is close to what I need and will work. However, the problem is when you stick 2 capacitors in series like this, if they are of like values, the value will actually be cut in half. As you can see here, we're at 473 microfarad. So now the idea is with 2 of these in parallel, that will be 70 volts total, but I will be bringing my value back up to around 1000 microfarad, and I'll show you what I mean. And there we go. Roughly 1000 microfarad. So this is what we need: 70 volt, 1000 microfarad. It looks ghetto as shit, but it's going to do the job. Okay, well, there we go. There's our bank of capacitors. Alright, I think that half amp fuse might be okay, but then again it might not. If I crank this thing all the way up, I'll crank the treble bass volume all the way up and just kind of rock on it for a second. But pay attention to the amps up in the top right hand side there. Right now it's reading 0.22. If it gets over 0.5, then that I'm going to have to change that fuse. The power down here is right now at 21.8 watts, and we'll see what the power consumption gets up to also. As you can see, it gets to about 420 milliamps, 0.42 amps, and the power stays pretty much just below 50 watts at peak. So yeah, I think it's going to be just fine. I think I chose well on the fuse. And also whenever I play hard right then, the voltage at that first node goes down actually to about 50 volts. So it'll never get over about 60, and I think everything is ready to go. Okay. Here we go. Now obviously this is not a bass cabinet, but this will give you an idea of what this thing should sound like with bass. I'm not going to crank it or anything. By the way, this bass is a late 1960s Kawai made Kingston, if you're interested. Very cool bass. Nice sounding. Feels great too. I love this bass. Need to intonate it a little bit, but it's pretty much there. This one's kind of cool. It also has a mute, which is pretty dry rotted, needs to be replaced, but really cool bass. And actually this amp is sounding really great. Everything is straight up and down. I'm going in the bass input. It also has a normal and an auxiliary input, which are exactly the same. So yeah, that is probably a early 1970s Deluxe Bass Amp, made in Japan. Not sure who made it in Japan, but it was made in Japan. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have, once again I do it. If you has, please hit subscribe. Make sure you also hit the little bell and choose get all notifications. Otherwise you'll probably not get but about half of the notifications that you should. So anyway, we'll see you guys later. Take care.